Hello, everyone. This is Chris Oyoung coming to you from the PhotoShelter World headquarters here in New York City. And today we are talking how to know when to buy versus rent your camera and photo equipment. And we are very, very lucky to be joined by the knowledgeable and talented Brian Tetrault from LensProToGo, one of my favorite companies in the photo industry. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks very much, Chris. Good to be here.
But before we get started, there are a few housekeeping notes. For everyone who's online with us today, PhotoShelter is live tweeting the webinar, and so if you have questions or insights from the webinar today as we go along, feel free to tweet them at PhotoShelter using the hashtag PSWebinar, and we will keep the conversation going there. In addition, if you have any questions along the way, everyone is in listen-only mode. So if you have a question for Brian or myself, there is a little chat box in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen, and you can just type a question in there, and Lauren from the PhotoShelter staff will be fielding those questions as we go. And we're also having some time for Q&A at the very end of the webinar, so we'll do that live, and yes, we are recording it. So without further ado, here's Brian.
Thanks, Chris. And hello, everyone. Again, my name is Brian Tetrault. Thanks for having me, PhotoShelter. So today, I just want to make sure and get out there that this kind of stigma of renting versus buying, a lot of people that we talk to don't even really know much about renting, and they're not really sure kind of when they do it, why they would do it. So some of the stuff I'm going to be covering today is things like why you'd even consider renting. When is a good time to rent? What should you buy? What kind of gear should you have? And also some of our top rentals at LensProToGo, some of the things that we rent all the time.
And Brian, would you, just in case anyone thinks they should be in basket weaving 101, could you just give us an overview of who LensProToGo is and what you all do, just in case?
Absolutely. So LensProToGo is an online rental company. We do have an office that you can come in and rent stuff in person. It's in Concord, Massachusetts. It's our only location, but all of our business is done online. And basically what happens is that you can go online, find the gear that you need, tell us what dates you need it for. We ship it right to your front door, and when you're done, you pack it back up and ship it right back to us. We've had other people mention that it's kind of like a Netflix, but for photo gear. So, we kind of agree with that, except it's a lot more expensive equipment, of course. So that's the very bare bones basics of what we do.
So great. So why and when should you sort of consider renting?
So as you can see on the screen, I have a couple bullet points here that I want to go over. And the first one being is that renting is oftentimes much more financially feasible than buying. And we're going to get a lot more into this in later slides too, Chris. But this is probably one of the more popular reasons why people would even rent. It just has to do with the outrageous cost of some of these pieces of equipment, and just a lot of people not wanting to put out that kind of money. So we're going to talk more about that later as well, but that's definitely one of the top reasons. It also allows you access to some very unique gear that you may not even know exists out in the world, and that you wouldn't necessarily even normally buy. For example, some things like underwater housings. That's not something really you're going to buy. How many times you're really going to use that? If that's all you do, then yeah, you're probably going to buy one. But that's a very unique piece of gear, specialized, that is the perfect thing to rent.
And underwater housings are, if you've never looked into buying one, which I have, they're shockingly expensive.
Yeah, well, especially if you want to kind of go the step up, like the equipment that we have, and not just have kind of the camera in a glorified Ziploc bag like some of the housings are. Our housings are fully controllable of your camera, so you can hit every single button on the outside of the camera. You can review images, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a big step up. It's also a great way to have backup gear for some shoots. A lot of times, including myself, I've done this. I do a lot of commercial shooting. If it's a really, really big job, I don't necessarily have 3 or 4 backups with me. I don't own that kind of gear. It's just too expensive of an investment to do. But if it's a really important job or I'm traveling somewhere, I want to make sure and have the backup gear that I need. So I'll right away rent it. More of a peace of mind than anything else. If a camera goes down or a lens goes down or something like that, I'll know right away that I have it. I always say I'd rather have it than be looking for it.
Yeah, and you can't use creatively what you don't have on site.
Exactly, that's a
And you
great
can't
point.
use creatively what you have just broken on site.
Right, right. So along those lines, traveling within the U.S., a lot of people may not even realize that LensProToGo is one of the only companies out there of our kind that will actually ship to hotels. So if you're traveling, whether it's on a job or just for vacation or whatever, we'll ship right to your hotel so that you don't have to take the stuff on the plane, which, as we all know, it can be a huge hassle a lot of times. So that's a great kind of tip for people thinking about traveling.
Yeah, I think the last time I traveled for commercial work, which was just a couple months ago, I took with me probably 150 pounds of
Oh,
gear that I was summarily charged for,
yeah, right.
and worried about every second I was on the flight.
Right, yeah, because of course it's below your feet, so you never see
Well,
it. You don't
no,
know how they're
it
doing it.
wasn't below my feet. Yeah, it
Oh,
was below decks, so to speak. And
right.
I was worried that something was going to break or get lost or get gone through by TSA, which
Yep.
it did. Luckily, nothing got broken,
Oof.
but everything
Oof.
got searched by TSA, and I was in fear of, you know, um, screwing something up on the actual job,
Right.
missing a crucial piece of equipment, which I, should have thought of Lens Pro, I guess, to
Right.
take care of that worry for me.
Right. Right. Um, so the next thing would be that you can try something new as well. We have we carry mostly Canon and Nikon gear for cameras and lenses, and we are almost always getting the newest stuff as soon as it comes out, especially from those two companies. So if there's a new camera that comes out or a new lens that gets released or something like that, you can almost guarantee that we're going to have it. And this is a great way. If you have a great example, would be the Canon 24 to 70, which we're going to talk more about later too. But the new version came out, I think it was maybe within a year ago,
Yeah,
and
it
it
was
was a
within the year.
huge update to the lens. And we made sure everyone knew about it, that we had it, and it is still to this day one of our top rentals because it is such an amazing piece of glass, but it is very expensive to buy it. So some people are just trying it, seeing how it's better or different from the original 24 to 70, and trying to figure out if they want to maybe make the investment or if they just want to keep renting it and using their other 24 to 70 as a backup, for example.
And Brian, we had a question as to whether or not you will either ship or sort of permit rental or taking rental things rented from LensProToGo to other countries.
We absolutely permit it. So our deal is that we exclusively use UPS to ship everything. And UPS, for us, UPS is only going to ship to somewhere in the United States. So as long as the address is in the United States and can be validated by UPS, it can go there. So if you're leaving the country, you're welcome to leave the country with our gear. Just know that if you don't get our protection plan or whatever, that's going to be on you, unfortunately. But yes, you can absolutely take our gear out of the country.
Great, thank you.
And the last thing here on this side is kind of goes along that lines, interestingly enough, good segue, that a lot of times it's safer to be renting because we do have that protection plan. Many people don't have rental coverage as a part of their business insurance or homeowners insurance. It is a pretty kind of specified thing on a lot of insurance policies, and it can end up being pretty expensive as an addition to your insurance policy. So a lot of people just don't have it or don't add it on. So we have a per item optional protection plan that you can add on. So if you are leaving the country with gear, for example, and you don't have great coverage on your equipment or something like that, you can of course rent from us, add the protection plan on, and that's going to cover you for a lot of things, mainly damage.
But even if you're not leaving the country with gear, and you're actually using it for work, um, it's the kind of thing that you would want to either check your existing insurance policy against or actually just add it on as a matter of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we a lot of times, especially when we get first-time orders from people, you'll get a phone call from us if you don't have the protection plan on, and basically we just double check to make sure that everyone checks their current insurance policy, even if it's just a homeowner's insurance policy, to see if they have rental covered, and if not, we highly recommend doing the protection plan. It's kind of comparable to getting that, the insurance when you rent a car, for example. It's like if you don't do it, you're going to be in big trouble if you get hit. But it's nice peace of mind when you do have it, and it's cheap enough where you don't have to worry too much about it. So moving right along. Our next slide here is when is a good time to rent. So we've talked a little bit about this already, but just to kind of put it a little bit more in perspective, a great one is if you're just starting out, whether you're just fresh out of school or going into school, or you're really just trying to kind of get out of the hobbyist mode and kind of things like that. This is a great way to kind of step up your game, as it were, a little bit beyond what we refer to as the kit lens, which we call it the kit lens because a lot of times that's what gets sold with the camera bodies when you buy them from a lot of places. And
Okay, awesome.
most often they are
I
not.
see.
Uh-oh, we're getting background noise. um, Anyways, the kit lenses are often very low quality. They work, and they work for most situations, but they're not going to at all be the best lenses that are out there. The second kind of thought here is if you have a really important shoot you need backup gear for. We kind of talked about this already a little bit, but I'm hoping there's even a lot of wedding shooters out there. If there was ever a time that I wanted to make sure and have backup gear, it was when I was shooting a wedding. Personally, I don't shoot weddings, but I've experienced enough and spoken to enough wedding shooters that, boy, if you don't have backup gear and something happens, you don't want to be shooting the whole wedding with your iPhone or something like that.
No, and it's one of those sort of really important things to consider. I do shoot weddings and have done so professionally for about 6 years now. I work for another photographer, both first and second shooting, and one of the first things he made me do was go out and get backups.
Right.
Because, and it's amazing how many people who are shooting these sort of lifetime events that you can't redo, whether it be birthdays, weddings, bar bat mitzvahs, and you see that they've only got one body, and they're changing lenses constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it only takes, as great as good word of mouth can be when you've done a fantastic job, really bad word of mouth can really seriously ruin your business if, for instance, the one body you brought to the event goes down.
Right.
And it's a lot worse than missing the kiss if you didn't have a working camera to photograph it in the first place.
Exactly. Well, and the thing with like weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff like that too, and parties, is that there's a lot more quote unquote moving parts that you don't have control over. Whereas in a commercial world like I'm in, I have a lot more control over the situation of what's happening around me, all that kind of stuff, so I can kind of a little bit better protect my gear and myself and everything like that. But when you're at a wedding and you're in the middle of a dance floor, no matter what kind of camera strap you have on or anything like that, all it takes is for one stray arm to hit your lens or something like that, and it goes down.
Yeah, and this is something that I was very, very happy to have had backup gear for, but at a wedding, I had a very popular camera strap fail,
Ooh.
in which the piece that connects the strap, the bolts that connects the strap to the camera, failed and came undone, and sent my Nikon D4 SB900 and 70 to 200 crashing to the floor.
Oh,
And
jeez.
that was like, I don't even know. You imagine like close to $10,000 hitting the ground and being totally inoperable.
I think everybody
Um,
out there is cringing with you
yeah,
right now.
and I cringed for a second, but I wanted to like sort of show no fear and kept shooting with the other two bodies that I had there.
Right.
But if I hadn't had that, I would have been in no uncertain terms screwed.
Right, right, and that's a perfect segue to my next bullet too, where if you do have some gear that's broken, and you're not necessarily a part of one of the professional service organizations from Canada or Nikon, the CPS or NPS, um, this is the way. If you have to send your stuff out for repair, and you have jobs coming up, very very often those repairs are going to take sometimes many weeks, depending on what the repair is, and most of the time, unless you're a part of one of those professional organizations, they're not going to give you, a free return body or something. So being able to rent stuff while your gear is out for repair is oftentimes essential. So you don't have to, call up your clients or something like that and say, oh, we have to reschedule because my camera's broken. It's like, well, no, just rent it and you can keep your dates and all that kind of stuff.
And even if you are a member of professional service like Nikon Professional Services, they won't often, or even maybe it's just out of stock, give you a loaner when it's broken.
Right,
Not you
right.
can't. It's something that they advertise as doing, and oftentimes can, but they couldn't for my last camera body.
Uh-huh.
Um, my D800 went to the shop for 2 weeks, and that was their service timer, the pro services turnaround time.
Wow.
Um, and they didn't have a replacement for me.
Oof.
So I had to rent,
Tough.
which I did,
Yeah.
which was great.
Glad we can help you out. Next deal here, we've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but I think it's a very, very important one to highlight, is about if you don't want to or can't make the investment into some very expensive pieces of equipment. For example, Canon just released a new lens, the 200 to 400, which was incredibly sought after, and people were waiting a very, very long time for that lens. LensProToGo carries them. To purchase, they're $12,000, roughly, give or take a couple hundred. But there's not going to be many people out there that are even going to be able to push out that kind of money, I would imagine, especially for how much you may use it. But renting it is not a problem at all, and you don't have to put out anything anywhere close to that kind of investment. And even if you're only going to use it, a handful of times throughout the year, why spend $12,000 on something that may be tough to sell down the road if you want to? So, these are some things that you kind of need to weigh in on and kind of ask yourself, is like, well, do I want to buy that super telephoto lens, or, is it definitely more worth renting it? And we do have a slide coming up here a little bit later, where I'm actually going to go over some hard numbers to show everyone out there, kind of, based on our rental costs, how many times you have to rent before you get to some of the gear that we offer, get to the value of it. So hopefully that'll help out.
I mean, that bullet point is something I think photographers are sort of, it's hard to resist the lure of the next new shiny piece of gear that
Yep.
you would love to own, and you sort of make up all of these reasons as to why, what you're going to use it for, how much better it's going to make your photos, and how much money you are going to make by the ownership of uh, this piece of equipment, whether it's a $12,000 200 to 400 or a $2,000 24 to 70.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if and much of that is sort of like convincing yourself that you need this thing, when in fact you could spend the money simply renting it to see if you actually liked it and it was going to work for your photography, and B, uh, the cost of a rental versus buying it, you can continue to take the jobs that you would use these lenses for, and the cost is such a small amount that you can even just build it into your profit margin,
Right.
or what's being billed or invoiced out to the client,
Hmm. Yep.
without
And
assuming all of the risk of either ownership, depreciation, or breakage.
right. Exactly. And actually, I can jump down to my last bullet point on this slide for that one real quick, because we have many people who will do the try before you buy theory, which is basically what we're just talking about here. And the idea behind that is, even if it's not a new piece of gear, maybe it's something that, you know what, I'm ready to upgrade my camera, or a couple lenses or something. Let me try them. Let me spend a couple hundred before I spend a couple thousand. And a lot of people don't really see how you can validate that. But again, it's like when you're dropping that kind of money to buy something, what if it doesn't work, or what if you don't like it, or whatever. You're just going to buy it because other people are telling you should. I don't know, especially with cameras. I have a perfect example of this. I was up in Gloucester yesterday, Gloucester, Mass, shooting with my friend. I was helping him out. He's doing a portrait project up there, and he's shooting with a D700, and he's got two of them actually for backup. And we started talking on the way home, and he's been many weeks thinking about upgrading to the D800. So finally, I just told him, I said, well, why don't you just rent it, and we'll shoot some with it together. I can help you out with it, and answer any questions you might have, and then you can decide from there if it's actually going to be make sense to buy it. Because again, the D800 now I think is up over still $3,000 to buy, but if you can spend
Just under $3,000 if you on Amazon.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So just under $3,000, but again, to spend, somewhere between, around $100, $150 or something, he's going to rent it for, a week and play with it and see if it really works. So, I'm hoping it goes one way or the other for him, but it's the try before you buy is huge, especially with bigger investment lenses.
Yeah, and I ran into trouble years ago for lenses that gear I wish I had tried before I bought it, because oftentimes, especially if you're using the equipment professionally, you read all the reviews, you go to all the websites, you look at all the sample photos, and you say, okay, I'm going to buy this thing, and you can't tell in the first couple of days, or just like shooting it in the park near your house or the backyard, whether or not it's going to actually work in the situations you need to. And so I've
Right.
ended up with, in my case, unfortunately, thousands of dollars in equipment that I wish I had not bought,
Right.
and that I wish I'd tried uh, in serious circumstances for a week or two before actually buying, because I ended up having to just sell it at a loss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the loss you had to take was probably more than you had to spend on would have
Yeah,
spent on
and
renting
in
it.
my case, they were third party lenses, so
Mm-hmm.
the resale value on those was far less than what I would have gotten if I had at the time been able to afford either Nikon or Canon.
Right. Right.
At the time, it was Nikon glass.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. So, just a couple last points here on this about when also would be a good time to rent. Maybe you need some extra lighting. A lot of people think that LensProToGo just rents lenses or just lenses and cameras. We don't. We have many more items to rent beyond that, including lighting, including speed lights for both Canon and Nikon. Got many of those. So many times you're shooting maybe a few weddings a year, and you have one speed light, but you want another one or two more so that you can work with your wireless systems, on the dance floor and stuff like that. Or maybe you even want to step it up and say, it's like, well, I don't own any strobes, but I've been asked to do this really cool job where I actually need some strobes. I don't know anyone that I can borrow them from, so how about I just rent them? And we most definitely rent strobes as well, and we have continuous lighting, beyond all of that kind of stuff. So lighting often is a big one, even if it's adding on to what you already have. Like if you own two strobe heads, but you need four for this job coming up. Well, rent two more, why buy them if it's just for 1 or 2 jobs coming up? So lighting wise, we get a lot of people renting lighting, and we get some really new stuff too, including we just got the new Priya light. If anyone knows what that is, it's check it out. It's a very, very cool light, and those are kind of hot ticket right now. So.
And so I'm going to sort of grill you on the extra lighting, um, either in boutique or expanding horizons with other gear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things in your inventory that I would love to try, but I have no
Mm-hmm.
idea how to use.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to video. So how do you sort of bridge that gap between figuring out what someone would actually need for a job, or even if they're just trying something, and actually helping them decide if it's something they should buy if they're trying it, or helping them figure out how to use it if they're actually going to use it for work?
That's a great question. One of the things that we very much pride ourselves on is that everybody that works for the company, every single person, is either a professional photographer or professional filmmaker. So we all have businesses outside of LensProToGo. So we all have the knowledge and know-how and experience to back up anything that you could throw at us. And if I can't answer it, I'd hand you over to somebody else that can. So we get people every day calling in asking these great questions about, it's like, well, I have a couple Dynalights, and can I hook those in with alien bees that you have, or can I do this, or there's I'm looking to try out a slider for some cinema stuff that I'm working on coming up. Which one is going to be best for me? And we will have a conversation with you. We will figure out what you're shooting and give our opinion as to what we would recommend in a lot of those cases. And we don't mind handing it off to somebody else if we need to as well. So I hope that answers your question, but that comes up a lot, and we just want to make sure that people are taken care of, and that we're just not just going to send you the gear and like, good luck, hope hope everything goes well.
Would you say that you have sort of someone on staff who is more or less expert level with all of the inventory? I mean,
Absolutely.
not any one person, of course, but
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, basically we all specialize in our own things. So there's definitely overlap, but if someone's really looking for something specific, one of us can answer that. So we have our couple wedding shooters, we have our couple wedding videographers, we have our commercial advertising photographers, our commercial in advertising, videographers and all that kind of stuff. So, everybody kind of is good in their own way and does their own thing. It's pretty rare that there's questions that come up in the course of a business day that we can't answer. So, really it ends up coming down to if a question comes up that's just very, very, obscure, and they're trying to do something, we're still going to try to help you as best we can. But yeah, for the most part, somebody will specialize in something.
and do you think it only makes sense to rent for the short term? Let's say that someone has a long term, a month long even project abroad.
Hmm.
And if you added up sort of all of the rental days, the actual cost of renting might be 30, 50, even more percentage of the actual retail cost of the item.
Hmm. So, I mean, we actually get people that rent like that all the time. Long-term rentals, we do a minimum 4-day rental, but beyond that, you can add as many days as you want. Um, and it is not rare for us at all to get people renting for a week, 2 weeks, a month. And a lot of times, for a lot of the reasons that I've mentioned, folks will just rent because either they don't want to buy it, even if it is approaching the cost to purchase it. Maybe they just don't want to purchase it. Maybe they don't want to have the headache of the depreciating asset, for example, or something like that. And maybe they don't have the right kind of insurance to cover a piece of equipment like that. So they'll just rent it from us, have the protection plan added on, and there you go. So I mean, it's kind of funny in the office we talk about, a lot of times there's people that will just rent the same things over and over and over again, well beyond the value of the piece that they're renting, and to each their own for sure. But I think that a lot of times people maybe just can't punch out that big cost up front as well, but they can easily piece it together once a month to rent the lens that they really want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting.
So just the last couple here so we can move on. I also have, which we've talked about a little bit, expanding horizons. It's a great way if you're going to, you're really working in the photography world now, but you want to kind of expand and look into potentially starting to shoot some video. Of course, we have piles of video gear, and again, we have the education to back it. So we can help you out and kind of talk to you about what might be best for what you want to try and all that kind of stuff. We've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to bring it up too. Having a second shooter, a lot of times, for weddings, if you have a second shooter, they don't have the gear that you'd like them to have. So perhaps you're going to rent it for them, or you have them rent it. I think you mentioned before, Chris, about either you or somebody wanted you or you wanted them to make sure and have the right gear, so you rented it for them. So why don't we move on? And our next slide is going to be talking about what I think and what kind of we think as a company would be, what would be good to buy? What should you buy? And we definitely all agree that you should have kind of the staples for gear. And it will be different for everybody depending on what you're doing. But here's my list of kind of the bare bones basics. You want to have at least a camera body, which again kind of sounds common sense, but have a camera body with a couple memory cards. We definitely recommend having some kind of zoom lens, even if it's approaching kit lens, depending on what kind of work you're doing. You of course can always rent better better zoom lenses. But have a good zoom lens, and possibly even a secondary lens. And I have a note here that make sure that your secondary lens does something different than your primary lens. And what I mean by that is don't have it overlap with your zoom lens, for example. And by that I mean don't have an 18-200 zoom lens, but then also have the nicer 70-200 lens. That's overlapping, and that's not recommended at all. Your secondary lens should be something more like a prime lens that's really fast, like a 50-1.2 or 1.4, or something like that, to make sure that it's different enough so that you can use it in a different situation. I put in here, have maybe a speed light. It is optional in my eyes. You don't need a speed light or two, but especially if you're in the wedding game, event shooting, that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend at least owning one speed light and then renting any additional that you might need. And then, of course, your standard grip gear, your bags. I think, personally, I think everybody should have a pop-out reflector. It's one of the easiest tools to learn how to use and learn how to get good at when you're shooting outside and even inside, for that matter. Your tripod and all that kind of stuff. Those are the really basic kind of staples of gear that you should have. And then I have a note at the bottom here that if you're going to invest in anything, we always tell people to invest in lenses. So if you are putting yourself on some kind of budget, and your buddy's telling you about this amazing camera that just came out, and you have to get this because it does this, and has GPS functionality and all, and it's like, well, look at the cost of that camera body versus the next step down, and see what that looks like, and then maybe put that money towards stepping up on the lens that you're getting. The reason we say invest in lenses is because that lenses not only hold their value better, but there's also much less mechanics within a lens, meaning they'll last longer. Especially depending on how you treat it. But A lens will be able to go on almost any camera that you buy, but the cameras most definitely have a shelf life, and we'll see in a second when I start talking about numbers is that when we do talk a little bit about the wonderfully boring subject of depreciation, lenses hold value considerably better than camera bodies, particularly name brand lenses like Canon and Nikon. So, if you have this stuff already, great. But if you don't have some of this stuff, I definitely look into doing it. And this could be a good opportunity to even do a try before you buy, for example. So I believe our next slide is just going to show us some of what we have for top rentals. So this is just a very small sampling of some of the stuff that LensProToGo carries. And of course, you can see all kinds of pricing and stuff on our website. But you can see these are kind of our top renters. This is the stuff that people are renting most often. Some of these might be a surprise to you. Some of them might not be. But you can see there's some very popular bodies, very popular lenses. It's amazing to me that how often things like the 35mm L lens for Canon rents. It's astonishing. And I haven't put it on these notes here, but all of these lenses I'm referring to on the Canon side are all of the L series lenses, and on the Canon side are the G series lenses, which just for everybody out there, those are the kind of the top line lenses on each side in Canon and Nikon. The best of the best optics, best everything. And you see some of the cinema gear as well. Some people don't even know what some of these things are, like the Blackmagic cinema camera. Why would I even want that? Well, we can help you out. You can reference our blog. You can kind of look at why something like that might even be good. Why I'd even want to look at that. Canon makes these things called a C100 and C300. What the heck are those? Is that something that I want to look into? We carry some Zeiss cinema lenses. Well, what's the difference between a cinema lens and just a regular lens? We can answer all that stuff for you, and these are some of the really popular stuff that goes out all the time. And of course the lighting. There's a reason that we carry what we carry. We back it fully because we think it's the best that you can get for the best value. We're not necessarily always going to carry the most expensive piece of equipment that exists in the world, because then we'd have to charge way too much money to you all out there. So what we will do, however, is go through the process of testing gear, especially testing new pieces of equipment that comes out, to make sure that it's going to service our customers as best as it possibly can. And then and only then is when we're going to decide if we're actually going to rent it or not. So that's why you see names like Light Panels and Westcott and Alien Bees and Priolite, because we feel that those are some really great brands out there. So here is our by the numbers, and I apologize if this gets a little boring, but just to kind of lay it out, the way I've structured this is I've picked some, not only a couple very popular renters from us, but also just some other kind of random pieces of equipment. And what I've done is the first column here is the retail price based on B&H Photo Video in New York. This is kind of, some of these numbers are rounded, but these are the retail cost if you were to buy this today. And then the next column, I have done a somewhat standard 2-year depreciation on that lens. So basically, I've done 10% depreciation for lenses, and I've done a 30% depreciation for camera bodies. And you can get a feel for how different those numbers look. And the reason I did 2 years is basically just because oftentimes, cameras get replaced within 2 years in terms of from the factory. So, a new camera will come out at least every 2 years, sometimes even sooner than that. So I just kind of picked that as a somewhat standard time frame. The next column, I've put in the cost per rental, and that is based on our website. And just please do note that these prices you're seeing for the cost per rental do include round-trip shipping. We're the only company to do that of our kind. So these are not, no surprise costs here. The only thing that would get added on to these numbers is sales tax based on your state, and everybody has to do that. All companies have to do that, so that's not unique to us. And this also doesn't include the protection plan, which of course is optional. So what I've done here is I've ran all these numbers, and for example, the new Canon 24-70 version 2 L lens, in order to get you to the 2-year depreciated value of that lens, you'd have to rent it 22 times. And again, that is at the minimum 4-day rental. That's kind of a lot in my eyes. 22 times in 2 years where you have it for 4 days. You might find that you are shooting with it more, but who knows? 5D3 as well, 18 times before you get to the 2-year depreciated cost value of that. 24 for the Canon 300. LensProToGo now has a whole pile of packages, including this one that I've put in here. It's we call it the Nikon 2 Zoom kit, which is excellent kit for wedding shooters. So the kit includes a D800, the 24-70 G lens, and then the new 70-200 version 2 G lens. And we rent that for $296 for 4 days, including shipping. And what I've done with the depreciation, of course, is did the 30% on the body, 10% on the lenses, and you'd have to rent that whole package 20 times before you hit that 2-year depreciation. So I thought that was very interesting for 3 items like that.
I mean, if you throw a flash into that kit, you've got a really good, well-functioning event or wedding kit for $300 for 4 days.
Exactly.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, and it is 2 years, but and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are shooting more than 10 weddings a year. As I've put the 20 number over 2 years to get to that value. However, within that 2 years, there could be an update to one of those pieces of equipment. They could easily come out with, D800S, a 24-70 version 2, all this kind of stuff. And, buying it, you're somewhat stuck with that stuff. I mean, obviously, if you want to, resell it, take the loss and buy the new version. But us, we're always going to keep that stuff updated. So these numbers won't really change too much. Obviously, new pieces of equipment come out. We do have to adjust our numbers a little bit, but it won't be too much. And then, of course, I put in here just kind of a, kind of bigger item that we offer, the Canon C300 cinema camera. Cost $16,000 to buy it. 2-year depreciation, right around $11,000. We rent it for $750 for 4 days. So in 2 years, you'd have to rent that 15 times. That's a lot. If you're shooting, big productions, 15 times within 2 years with this particular camera, you're doing great. But I'm not sure you're going to get that far. So this is that's definitely one of those that it's a big ticket item. And that's a perfect example of one of those. Like, do I want to drop $16,000 and have it depreciate that much in 2 years when I'm sure there's going to be a new update camera that comes out within those 2 years? So those are just a lot of things that we need to think about. So moving on, I think this is the end here, and we are going to open up to questions in a second, but I do want to make sure to all of our listeners out there, we have set up a promo code. So if you do want to give us a try, or if you're already a customer, thank you, by the way, you're also welcome to use this. This is a promo code just for you guys out there. It is rent versus buy, all one word. This is going to get you 10% off of any size order, and you can use it as many times as you want, good through the end of this month, so through August 31st. Again, it's 10% off any size order. You can use it as many times as you want. So even if you want to place some orders out months and months away that you're planning, you have some weddings coming up, you're welcome to do that. So I hope that helps everyone out there, but let me know if you have any questions.
Brian, what's the general cost of insurance? You kept mentioning this sort of protection plan um, throughout the webinar. What's the general add-on cost for that for either, let's just say, a 4-day rental?
So it doesn't change per rental. In terms of the duration of the rental, it won't change too much. But generally speaking, it's for per item, it's about $5 to $15, of course, depending on the item. Again, and what it covers is it covers damage, so accidental droppage and things like that. What it won't cover is loss, theft, or water damage. And the reason for that is if we can't cover loss or theft, because then everyone would rent a lens from us for a couple $100 and then keep it and say they lost it, and then we're kind of screwed. So we can't cover that. And the water damage comes in because the camera companies, mainly of course Canon and Nikon, if a camera or lens gets dunked, they do consider it a complete loss, and they have to completely replace it. So with our protection plan, what happens is that the customer is only responsible for a 10% deductible. So if you don't have the protection plan and you break our $2,000 lens and it needs to be completely replaced, you're paying $2,000. If you had the protection plan, you'd only be responsible for $200. So, and again, that's if you drop it, it falls, it cracks, whatever happens to it, besides getting dunked in the water, lost or stolen, you're covered, and you're only paying that 10%.
That's interesting because the last time I broke a lens, it was my own insurance policy was a $500 deductible.
Gotcha. Yep.
So that's an interesting note. And Brian, can you confirm LensProToGo will ship to any U.S.-based address, including hotels?
That's correct. Yeah. The only thing
if I have a job out of state and I don't either want to travel with it or I don't have the equipment to travel with, period, I can rent and have it drop shipped to the hotel, complete the job there, and then ship it from the hotel, basically pack it back up and leave it there?
That's correct, yeah. So some hotels, we actually just experienced this recently ourselves, some hotels do require you to schedule a pickup with UPS, but many hotels, especially the bigger ones, have shipping and receiving departments where UPS comes in and out every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. So sometimes some hotels will charge you some small fees depending on the size of the package, the weight of the package. We don't take care of those fees. The customers would have to take care of those. But many times the hotels don't charge you anything, which is great. So basically, you get the package shipped to the hotel. At check-in, you ask for it. They look it up in their system, and we've done this ourselves when we travel to trade shows and tours and stuff like that. We have stuff shipped to ourselves at the hotel, and it works every single time. And again, we're basically the only company that will do that. The other companies are a little afraid of that. So.
And so, how do you recommend that when a photographer is getting to know? How do you recommend that a photographer actually get to know the equipment that they're renting if they need it before a job or an important shoot?
In terms of if it's something new that they've never shot with before?
If it's something new that they've never shot before, or an updated thing that they're not familiar with, is it sharp? Does it work with my camera, et cetera, et cetera?
Gotcha. Yeah. We always recommend that whenever you get a package from us, that you make sure and open it up, check it, make sure everything works, that it's functioning correctly and everything. And we always make sure that, of course, depending on what you're shooting, you play with it a little bit. You leave yourself some extra time. We have many people that will rent it an extra day beforehand just to make sure. They'll pop in that extra day of rental just so that they can play around with it. Sometimes you don't need that. Our stuff comes UPS, So if you need something on a Wednesday, we're actually going to ship it to you on Tuesday. So whenever your UPS person comes at the point on Tuesday, it is before your shoot. So you can prep, you can play with it, you can do whatever you need to. But as I mentioned, some people will actually do a whole extra day beforehand, so they have that whole day to check it, make sure it's going to do what they want it to do. And again, too, of course, we're verifying even before we ship stuff, that especially with new customers, that you are choosing the right piece of equipment and that it's not going to be an issue for you.
And I mean, one of the things that I initially worried about when renting was that if I was going to use the equipment professionally, meaning not on my vacation or something that was expendable,
Hmm.
is it going to arrive on time, and what condition is it going to arrive in? So what do you do to sort of take care of both of those? I know you just mentioned that everything actually arrives the day before the rental begins, so to speak.
Well, technically the day that it's arriving is the first day of your rental,
I
but
see. I see.
we take care of all that. So basically, when you're renting from us, we say, what days do you want it in your hands? What day do you need it in your hands? And if somebody, we feel out the situation, make sure that people aren't, it's like, well, I have an evening shoot on Wednesday. It's like, well, sometimes we have a lot of people that don't get their UPS packages until 7:30 at night. So we want to ship it to you the day before, which is when your rental would actually start. Um, but we are also the only company that ships everything in Pelican cases. So we want to make sure that all of our customers are getting their gear in one piece. There's no way that we want to be, just kind of bubble wrapping, putting in some cardboard and praying that it's going to get to you in one piece. And of course, we want to get it back in one piece as well. So
And so what do you do to make sure that everything's in good working order before the order is fulfilled?
every single piece of equipment that we have gets cleaned, checked, and gone over with a fine-tooth comb before and after rentals are happening. So, when stuff comes back, everything gets cleaned and checked to make sure it works. And before it goes out, it gets cleaned and checked again, make sure that everything works. So, we could basically guarantee that everything that you're going to get is going to be in working order. And if it's not, if something does happen, we do have situations sometimes where something will happen even in the shipping process in transit. Some of these shipping guys we know will just kind of toss boxes on porches. We know that. We've all seen the YouTube videos. If it happens, we will do our best to fix that for you and take care of it, whether it's getting you another piece of gear that's working or what have you. So we always try to do our best to fix any issues like that, but we don't see them nearly as often as some might think.
And Brian, the next question is sort of to your experience as a commercial photographer. Um, do you recommend, or do you personally list on your invoices or otherwise indicate to your clients that they are being charged, or you're itemizing either an equipment fee or rental fee?
That's a great question. I actually personally, and I think many people are different at this than I am, or we all do it different. But personally, I have a line item on my invoices and proposals, of course, that is an expense line item. And I put as a note under the expense line item that expenses may include X, 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 including equipment rentals. Um, Depending on the situation, there has been times where I will put in a completely separate line item for rental budget. And generally I'll do that if it's a very unique situation and we maybe have to spend a little bit more money than I would like on rentals. If they're really asking for a lot of stuff and I need to rent a whole pile of gear, this will come up in conversation before I even ever make the proposal, just to make
Right,
sure that everyone's kind of, on the same page with it and
right.
everything like that. For most things, I just include it in my expenses, but I make sure that it's shown in there that, this expense line does include or could include our equipment rental.
And in my own experience, I mean, most of the work that I do is editorial in nature, but for the commercial work that I have done or the like direct to client stuff, I try to make sure that when the client receives my initial estimate or proposal, that
Hmm.
there's no surprises. Meaning, like I don't add in an equipment or rental fee if we haven't discussed the need for that equipment later or
Hmm.
beforehand.
Right.
And in the sort of initial creative discussion as to like what is it going to take in terms of the people, uh, the wardrobe styling and equipment that is going
Hmm.
to actually be needed to take to do the job.
Right.
But I know some photographers, they always have an equipment fee
Hmm.
even if they're not renting anything that's for their own equipment. But I've worked with some commercial clients that uh, basically say if you're going to have a line item for equipment, they need to see the receipts
Hmm.
for that, meaning they're not allowing you to charge for your own equipment. So
Right. It was funny because I was just going to bring that up too because I actually have some buddies of mine who have been in the business for a long time, and they do just that. Basically, they'll buy a piece of equipment, even a computer sometimes, and basically rent it back to themselves. Charging clients a rental fee, and eventually they do that enough times, and they have it
right,
for
they've
free.
paid for it, yeah,
Yeah,
and they
I definitely don't condone that. I don't do that myself, but it is something that's a reality out in the business, and it happens. I'm not sure I agree with it, but
yeah, it's definitely sort of suspect, and I don't think you can, especially these days, when commercial budgets are so tight. I don't think you can really sort of get away with that. The
it's a little
jobs that I've
sneaky.
done, the receipts, the receipts and everything is pretty lean,
Hmm. Right.
and you don't. It's not worth having a shiny new laptop with jeopardizing that client relationship,
Right.
or in the case you're talking about, the relationship with maybe potentially multiple clients.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And I'm personally inclined to add the rental as an itemized thing on my
Hmm.
estimate, just because I don't want to give. I have my sort of lump sum fee for the proposal,
Hmm.
and then everything that isn't sort of my time, creative effort, and talent gets itemized
Right.
because I don't want to have to negotiate on my fee per se and have to chip off things like rentals and assistance and transportation by giving a lump sum, one item, everything as one item. I like to itemize everything so that when the client sees it, they know exactly how their money is being spent.
That's a great point. Great point.
And
Yeah.
if, they say, oh, we just can't have rentals on this one, I say, well, if that's the case, then uh, these are the things that are going to have to change from the creative direction
Right.
in order to accommodate that budget. And now we're having a conversation instead of an argument over price.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why is this number so bloated? Why is it so big? It's like, well,
Right.
it's right there. It's right in front of you. You can see it.
So it's now 5 o'clock, and
Perfect.
we're about of time,
Good
out of
timing.
time. And let's see. So we've sort of gone right into the live Q&A.
Hmm.
But if you're looking for LensProToGo or Brian specifically, here's where you can find both of them. Brian, do you want to sort of go through the slide?
Sure. Yeah. So if anyone out there hasn't heard of us or isn't sure where to find us, it's lensprotogo.com. We've also just launched within a few weeks ago a brand new blog we're calling LensProToGo Labs. You can find that at lensprotogolabs.com. We're very, very excited about that new blog. We are posting very often as we can, and we're using it as kind of a resource center for ourselves, not only posting things like product reviews and tips and tutorials, but also things like industry news, news about gear, new things that we start to carry, all that kind of stuff. And definitely make sure and find us on Facebook, lensprotogo.com on Facebook, and we're on Twitter at lensprotogo, and we also have the new Twitter account for the labs, which is at lensprotogo labs. So again, thank you, Chris, and I'm sure you're going to do some wrap up, but thanks everybody out there too for listening.
Thanks, Brian. That was very informative. And that's all we have today. Remember, the webinar is being recorded, so if we covered anything that you want to review, you'll find the recording probably within the next day or so at the address blog.photoshelter.com. And we hope you'll join us next on Tuesday, August 27th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for our next webinar on how to balance protecting and selling your photos in the digital age. This is going to be a great one for all of you out there with either PhotoShelter accounts or who have images online, whether that be just in your portfolio or an archive of stock images that you regularly sell online. And that will be Richard Kelly, who is a photographer and the former president of the American Society of Media Photographers, joining us for that. And see you next time. Thanks, everyone.